Hey, Danny Johnson here, and today I'm going to show you how to replace this fuel pump system. This is on a Chevrolet Suburban, but it's pretty much the same on the Yukon and the Silverado, the Sierra, the truck. So it's all pretty much the same process, so we'll get started. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pop the hood, disconnect the battery. There's going to be an 8mm on this side, and then depending on if it's the same, it might be 8mm on the other side or a different size. In this case we have a 17mm on this side. We're going to go ahead and take off both of these cable ends and disconnect the battery entirely. So we disconnected both of these and then tucked the actual wires down under here where they can't touch those posts. And just want to make sure the battery is completely disconnected. Now we're going to lift the rear of the truck into the air. Now we do want to get the rear of the car pretty high in the air, so we're going to go ahead and lift with our jack here on the frame, and we're going to put our jack stand pretty far back here, and it is going to have to be a somewhat bigger jack stand for this to work. And if you lift one side at a time like this, then go around the other side and lift the other side, you can get the rear end of the air pretty good. Some people lift directly on the rear axle, and the main problem with that is that if you don't have the front wheels chocked, the whole truck can roll forward. So you want to be very careful with this. You'll want to chock the wheels anyway in the front, but I like lifting it on each side individually, and that way it's a little safer. So then I went to the other side of the truck and did the same thing. I put the jack stand in basically the same place, same height. But there's our fuel tank going through here. So now remember that the rear wheels are in the air. That's where the parking brake and where the transmission puts power to the wheels. So when the car's in park, the rear wheels are the only thing that's holding the car right now. So you want to chock those front wheels, and just remember that the whole truck could roll forward now that we're only on our front wheels. So now under the truck on the driver's side, you'll follow the tank all the way to the back, and you'll find the hose that goes from where you put the fuel in, the filler neck, and you'll see that there's a clamp on there with an 8mm bolt. So we're going to go ahead and take that one off, and possibly even this one off, to separate this from the tank. Okay, so we have both of those clamps loosened up pretty good. Make sure you're wearing your safety goggles, because especially in a truck like this, you'll see how much dirt can fall in your eyes real quick. Okay, now we're going to go after these other clamps on the smaller hose as well, since it's also connected to the gas tank. So we'll remove those clamps. Okay, so with these clamps off, now you can see you can pull the hoses off of the fuel tank. So I got this one, now I'm just working on this one. And I have this one loose here to pull up on. And I also loosen these top ones so you could twist it a little bit if that helps. But we're basically pulling these off of the fuel tank on this side. Once you do that, you'll start to smell. In fact, you can see the fumes coming out from the fuel tank. So make sure that you have your garage vented. Now you do have access right over the axle to reach up and grab that bigger tube. And you can use a pry bar if you're careful to help separate it, but just make sure you're not cutting that hose at all. Just go ahead and just work it off. Okay, so pry bar does help to loosen that up. Just make sure that you do not cut the hose in the process. Now that's a very heavy fuel tank when it's full, and it just so happens that this truck was topped off before the fuel pump died. So I ran over to Harbor Freight, and for $12 I bought both of these. You have a siphon pump over here that you can pump with, or just, this one's more of just like an actual hose. But I'm going to go ahead and siphon the fuel out and make that tank as light as possible. Yeah, I like this pump the most. It has an arrow on it, so you just put the tube down into the tank, pump it a few times, and it will continue to siphon on its own, as you can see. And so we're just filling up this fuel tank. Now this is quite a bit of fuel, so it does help if you have another car that you can pull over and fill up. Just a little tip here, some of these cars like this have this place you can put a screwdriver in to keep that open. And then you can just transfer the fuel into your other vehicle. Okay, so now we're coming in from the rear of the car here, and we're supporting the tank with a transmission jack. These are real nice if you happen to have one because they're flat. If not, you can use a regular floor jack. And since I have another floor jack, I'm just going to put one under here too. As you'll notice on the tank, there's these big bands that go around that hold the tank up. And so we're just going to go up in here, and we're going to put our 15mm socket on there and undo these straps. So we'll undo the back one and the front one. And so the idea here is for the tank to drop down just enough that we can get on top and unplug everything that goes into the fuel pump system. You want to make sure you don't just drop it straight down, or you could rip wires out. Okay, so our front strap is still connected at this point, and as you can see, we've lowered the rear of the fuel tank down a little bit more, and now we're going to siphon out any more of the fuel that's kind of gone towards the front just to make it lighter. And we're still supporting it up here, and it's still strapped in. But the bottom strap on the back, this strap is off, and it's helping us lower it down a little bit. Keep in mind that this tank drops this way, and the very front of it is on a ledge. And so if you let it slide forward, it will come all the way out, so you got to be careful about that. Okay, so we put our pump back up in there. We're just siphoning this out. And really, this pump was like $4 at Harbor Freight, and it's working like a charm. Remember, fuel is about 6 pounds per gallon, so when you have such a big tank on these trucks, it really does help to get as much fuel out of it as you can. Now, as we continue to lower this down and remove the front strap as well so that we can really get it to come down, we still want to be very, very slow as we lower it, because right pretty much here between the middle strap, or right in front of that front strap, is where you're going to find a lot of the things that we have to disconnect. So do tilt it down. This is the front of the car, this is the back of the car. Just continue to tilt it down and slowly lower it until you can disconnect everything that's up in here. So just a side note, if you are collecting this and trying to put it into another truck, as I'm doing, or another car, just remember you do want to keep one of these so that when you're all done with the project, you'll have fuel for your truck. And just remember, a low fuel level can burn up a pump, because that's what cools the pump down. So make sure that you have sufficient fuel in the tank when you go to start it up for the first time and drive it to your first gas station after the pump install. Okay, so we removed both the front strap, which is still being supported here by one jack, and the rear strap, which is being supported by our transmission jack. And we're going to continue to lower this one down, and remember, we do want this to stay up in there because it's locked in, and it'll lower this way. And we're just lowering it down so we can get some of those wires, but don't let this front part come out or the whole thing will drop. Okay, so we have the tank dropped here. It's pretty much, it's touching the jack, it's almost touching the floor. And so both straps are off, the back is towards the very, very ground. And now we have access up in here. We're going to take off this little cover here and disconnect our lines. So you see that line that's coming in here, that's really, you want to be careful of. And if you're doing this on a garage floor and not on a lift, you really should be able to drop the tank until it hits the ground before it should pull any of these wires out. So you should still be pretty good. I am still siphoning fuel out. In each step of the way as it's gone lower, I've just continued to siphon, because you go to lift this and you can feel how heavy it is, and you really want to make sure you have all the fuel out of it that you can. It'll just make your job a lot easier. Okay, so next I'm taking off these two nuts. They're 10mm, and I am actually doing this somewhat blind. The camera can see up in here, but you still have the drive shaft and everything here. So this part of it you might have to just kind of reach over and feel. But we're going to take off these two 10mm nuts right here. Okay, so with those two nuts out of the way, you can lift this cover off, and that's going to expose some of these plugs that we're going to go after next. Okay, so with the fuel tank pretty much touching the floor here, if you're lucky, I can barely make it in between this muffler and the drive shaft with my head and my body to get up in here. You can try it. But now we're going to go ahead and unplug all these connectors. So it'll probably be a good idea to bring a flathead screwdriver with you. Okay, these are pretty straightforward. This clip here, you're going to lift that tab up and then slide the plug off. This one over here, you're going to push down right here on the very back part of it. There's a place to push down. So push that down and slide that one off. Then these two up here, you're going to pinch them. So you may be able to see where there's kind of a, let's see if I can get you. Let's see if I can get you a better view of that one. But on these, they have tabs here that you're going to pinch on each side, and as you pinch them, then you can pull the fuel lines off. Okay, so everything's unplugged. I wish I could have shown you that on camera. Sorry, doing this one-handed. But we just unplugged those two, and on those two there, so the yellowish color ones there at the bottom, we just pinched. And once you pinch them, you can just pull those lines off. Now you will want to follow these lines here upwards and pop them out of their little retainers. They're being held in by little U-shaped clips. So just push up on them and just make sure that they're disconnected from the actual fuel tank there. Okay, so towards the front too here you have this box, and that's the last place in the front of it we have a connection line that's on this fuel tank, and it appears it just pulls straight out. In fact, I don't even know if this was connected. So now basically all we did was pull the fuel tank, just kind of moved it forward and slowly set it down. So you just want to make sure that that line was disconnected. You have your two lines here that we had them coming down from here, and they were locked into the tank there, and we popped them out, and those were the ones we disconnected from here. And so now the whole tank is disconnected, so we can pull it out from underneath the truck. So here's our fuel hat here, pretty much. Now up here there's a lock that you're going to have to move. As you see here, you push it out of this little notch to unlock it. And then the rest of the snap ring twists. You can see how these clamps here are locking it into place. So as you twist the whole thing all the way over, it'll loosen up off of these. So you have to undo it there, pull that up with the screwdriver, and then twist it with a big pair of channel locks or whatever you can find. So you can turn your screwdriver sideways, jam it in there in order to unlock that. So that screwdriver's just twisted in there. Now I'll take some big channel locks and slide this thing over. So in order to twist this ring, I just put a screwdriver here and hit it with a hammer, and that was able to slide this ring. So now that this ring is moved over, we can lift it out, and the pump automatically will pop up if it's spring-loaded on one of those kind of pumps. Now, I also did blow with compressed air to try to clean off this dirt, and you want to be careful not to get this dirt here. But now you want to just pull the whole assembly out, and this one, there we go, there's our sock. You kind of just got to rotate it to get the actual float out. But now the pump is out. Now I bought the factory replacement here from Bosch, and so when you set them side by side they look identical. However, the float has not been connected yet, and that's partially because you have this rubber seal. So before installing the float, you want to work that rubber seal on and just have it come up here just how it's on the other one. So we're going to just work this on and just get it around the top there. Then the float itself is pretty simple. Just look at the other one, and it's the same principle. We just put it in here and we'll push in to click it. So obviously this little piece here goes into that gold area, and the rest of the rod will lock into place right in the middle of that attachment. Okay, so that rubber seal fit nicely. I just walked it on here very gently. Be careful on this part too. And so that was really no problem. So now we're just going to attach this by putting it in here, and we're just going to click it into this attachment here. And that part I'll probably do off camera just so I have both hands on it. We're going to go ahead and just push straight on it until it clicks. Okay, so I just attached the float. It helps to put your finger behind it to support it, and then push on those tabs until it clicks into its spot. But that's in there pretty good. So now we can just work this back down into the tank and put it back over. First, we do have to take these off and transfer them over to our new system over here. To transfer these over, you have to be careful. I just removed this one. And let me show you what you have to do is come in here very carefully with like a knife or a screwdriver, and you have to lift this tab right here upward. So you got to pry it a little bit, and so you have to lift the tabs on each side right here. You got to lift that up so it can clear this ledge. So there's another angle that just got to get in behind it and push it outward so it can clear that lip, and then push from the back forward. So onto the new unit here, you just push it until it clicks. And so you're just basically pushing it over the front. Okay, so on these you just slide them back on until they click into their position. Make sure that that's what it looks like. Just do that on both sides. Now we're ready to put this back into the fuel tank, so we're just going to worm its way back in, just how it came out, and get it down in there. Okay, so we just dropped this back down in there. I did the float first, and then just kind of moved it around, and I took the sock part of it and just kind of flipped it straight up and got it down in that way. It doesn't sit inside anything down in the tank, but it does compress back down, and you got to make sure that these tabs line up there. And we'll be putting that snap ring that we took off, just kind of put it right back over here, get it back on, and basically we're gonna just push down on its little spring-loaded deal so that it lines up with those little tabs as it was showing, then we'll lock it back into place. Now I'm not gonna lie, this thing gave me a little bit of trouble going back in. I lined it all up correctly. As you can see, there's the plastic tab that's down where it's supposed to be. You'll see a little notch that it goes in. But it was a little difficult to push this spring-loaded thing down, put the snap ring in, and it takes a lot of pressure to really twist that thing. So I ended up using a weight here, screwdriver that I put inside the little notch like that, and I had to pound it pretty good with that weight to get some real momentum behind it in order to twist this ring into its spot. Now remember, in the back it does have that little piece that needs to lock into its place, but it didn't take too much pressure to push this thing back. I did end up putting vice grips on it to keep it clamped while I was twisting this ring on. But if you have another set of hands, it'll really help to have somebody push this down while you're lining that ring up. But it will take some pressure right there into that little notch with a screwdriver and a hammer to twist this ring to lock it back into place. And it doesn't really lock and snap, it just, you know, you just hit it basically until the metal part of it has a lot of pressure on that little this little U-shaped thing right here, or a little ledge. So just got to get it in the way that it came out, but just put some pressure behind it.